Hi everyone, it's time to read another chapter from our book Toys, and this chapter is bicycles, and our word for this chapter is continuous. Continuous means without interruption, and you'll see why in the story. In the world of inventions, the bicycle followed right after the wheeled hobby horse. All in all, the bicycle actually evolved from the kiddie car. It had 4 wheels and could be moved only by pushing with feet against the ground. Often the kiddie cars were made to resemble animals. More speed. Children wanted their kiddie cars to go faster. First, the animal design was done away with, and then off went a couple of the wheels. The 2 remaining wheels were greatly enlarged and then aligned down the center of the vehicle. Finally, handlebars and footrest were added. These primitive 2-wheelers went much faster than the 4-wheeled kiddie car. They were a huge improvement, but they had a long way to go before becoming true bicycles. Pushing with one's feet against the ground was still the only way to make them move. Worse, there was no way to steer or stop them. In 1816, a Frenchman invented the first bicycle that could be steered, called the Celerpede. The contraption included the wheels, was made entirely of wood. In 1839, a Scottish blacksmith named Kirkpatrick Macmillan came up with the idea of putting pedals on bicycles. The pedals were connected by long rods to the rear wheel, and the rear wheel was made to turn by pushing back and forth on the pedals. Though Macmillan's bicycle was constructed mostly of wood, the rods and the pedals were iron, and the wooden wheels had iron tires. How much did Macmillan know about the history of the bicycle? Chances are he was well aware that it had evolved from the hobby horse. A finishing touch he put on the front of his bicycle was a carved wood horse's head. And here's a picture of that. Bicycle with a wood head of a horse. It was a teenage French boy and his father who invented the pedals that work like those we use today. Pedals that go around in continuous motion. So there's our word, continuous. Continuous again means without interruption. The way they came up with the idea was fascinating. It's one of the most cases in which the basic idea behind one invention led to the idea for another. Here's what happened. One afternoon in March 1861, Ernest and his father Pierre set out to make footrests for a bicycle. His gaze coming to rest on the grindstone in the shed, young Ernest suddenly exclaimed that he had an idea. They could put pedals on the bicycle like the pedals on a grindstone. It could be kept turning in a non-stop motion or a continuous motion. For several days, the 2 worked side by side. When the bicycle was finished, Ernest took the first ride. Later, he wrote, "I was elated. The drive wheel revolved as though turning the handle and crank of a grindstone. The bicycle worked beautifully." Before the year was out, there was a manufacturing and selling their new bicycles, which they called velocipedes. The name is French and it means speedy feet. A man named James Starley invented spoked wheels and tubular steel frames. He also invented the world's goofiest looking bicycle, the kind with a huge front wheel and a tiny rear wheel. And they called it the Ordinary. For no reason, it had both its good and bad points. And here is a picture of the Ordinary, the bicycle with a large front wheel and a small back wheel. The Ordinary gave a much faster ride than any bicycle before it. Its speed was partly due to its hollow, light frame, but even more so because of its giant front drive wheel. Bicycles at this time had no gears. The speed at which they moved depended entirely on the drive wheel. The larger wheel, the faster the bike. The ordinary was not only fast, it gave a smooth ride. Enthusiasts liked it for the same reason that most people hated it. Riding an ordinary was dangerous, tricky, and required great skill. Because of its height, it was difficult just to mount the bike, and because of the size of the drive wheel, it was harder to get the vehicle going. It was tricky to steer. It tipped over easily, and especially when turning. Worst of all, any attempt of braking, particularly when headed downhill, often sent the rider flying over the handlebars. Most people could not ride an ordinary. It was not fear of falling and getting hurt. The reason was a different problem altogether, and a pretty insurmountable one. Only long-legged people could ride these bicycles. Individuals with average build or less than average could not reach the pedals. Thus, turning this era, most people had to ride tricycles. 1874, that was the year when H.J. Lawson designed what he called the safety bicycle, a chain-driven and man-made with wheels of equal size. The safety was the forerunner of the modern bicycle. 14 years later, John Dunlop made the safety a softer ride. He came up with the idea of a pneumatic air-filled tires. Until this time, they had either been solid rubber or semi-hollow cushion tires. In addition to inventing the ordinary, James Starley was determined to make a bicycle for women that was proper. That is, one design so a woman could ride it in formal attire without straddling the seat. What he came up with was definitely the craziest, most dangerous bicycle ever invented. Imagine trying to ride a bicycle side saddle. Starley designed and built a bike that women could ride while sitting at a 40-degree angle to the front. The contraption had a box-like sideways seat that was fitted with a complex pedal and crank mechanism. Here's a picture of that. That looks like a crazy bicycle to ride. Naturally, it was almost impossible to steer and balance, and almost every woman who tried riding it got hurt. Today, we still see a carryover of this idea of special bicycles for females. Take, for example, the down curve, the loop frame on women's bicycles. Back in the 19th century, manufacturers made them this way to give clearance for ladies, frocks, and dresses. But that was a long time ago. Fortunately, things have changed, and female cyclists now wear pants and shorts. Here's a couple fun facts. Macmillan was not only the first to put pedals on the bicycle, he also committed the first ever biking offense. On June 10, 1842, after a 40-mile ride, he accidentally crashed into a child and was fined 5 shillings. Scotchman John Dunlop developed the idea for the pneumatic tire to help his son ride his tricycle to school over rough cobblestones. The highest speed ever achieved on a bicycle was set by Dr. A. Abbott of California in 1980. Pedaling behind a giant windshield mounted on a speeding car, Dr. Abbott reached the speed of 140 miles per hour. In Japan, there are contests to see who can go the slowest on a bicycle. The record was set in 1965, who rode his bike for 5 hours and 25 minutes without going anywhere. I'd like to see that. Quite a few people have accomplished the feat of riding a bicycle across the United States, and one was Becky Gordon. Becky was only 11 years old when she arrived in Boston, Massachusetts, and on July 22nd in 1973, having set forth from Olympia, Washington on June 6th of that year. So do the math. How many days did it take her to get from Boston to Olympia? I hope you liked our story this week. Next week is going to be about remote-controlled cars and toys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.